Sophia Chen wiped down another table, her back aching from hours on her feet. The chatter of diners and the clink of expensive silverware filled the elegant hotel restaurant where she had worked for the past 8 months. It wasn't what she had planned for her life, but it paid the bills. And that was enough for now. "Table 12 needs water," called Raj, her fellow server, as he rushed past with a tray of cocktails balanced expertly on one hand. Sophia nodded, reaching for a crystal pitcher. As she poured water for the elderly couple at table 12, her eyes drifted toward the grand piano sitting untouched in the corner of the adjoining ballroom. The charity gala was set to begin in less than an hour, and the usual pianist, an older gentleman with kind eyes and nimble fingers, had yet to arrive. "That's strange," she murmured to herself, checking the ornate clock on the wall. Mr. Yamamoto was never late. Her thoughts were interrupted by the hotel manager, Mr. Reynolds, storming through the dining room, his face flushed with obvious frustration. He was a tall, stern man with graying temples and a perpetually furrowed brow, who ran the hotel with military precision. "Absolutely unacceptable," he hissed at the event coordinator trailing behind him. "The governor will be here, along with half the city's elite. How can there be no pianist?" The coordinator, a nervous young woman clutching an iPad, stammered. "Mr. Yamamoto called 10 minutes ago. His grandson was in a bicycle accident. Nothing serious, but he's at the hospital and can't make it. I've called 3 backup musicians, but they're all booked for other events." Sophia quickly looked away, pretending to adjust the flower arrangement on table 12. The last thing she needed was to be noticed when Mr. Reynolds was in this state. "The music is an essential part of the atmosphere," Mr. Reynolds said, lowering his voice but still audible to Sophia. "These people are donating thousands of dollars for children's music education. For heaven's sake, we can't greet them with silence." Sophia bit her lip and moved toward the kitchen, trying to become invisible. "It didn't work. You there, Sophia?" Mr. Reynolds called, stopping her in her tracks. She turned slowly. "Yes, Mr. Reynolds. Bring me the list of all staff on duty tonight. Perhaps one of them has some musical ability." He turned back to the coordinator. "Even mediocre piano playing is better than nothing at this point." Sophia clutched her serving tray tighter. "I'll get that for you right away," she said, hurrying toward the staff office. As she pulled the printed roster from the desk, Raj appeared beside her. "What's going on?" "Reynolds looks like he's about to explode." Sophia explained the situation while scanning the list. "He wants to know if any staff members can play piano." Raj's eyes widened. "Didn't you used to play?" "I remember you mentioned studying music in college." Sophia felt her chest tighten. "That was a long time ago," she said quickly. "I don't play anymore, but you could help out, right? Just for tonight?" "No," Sophia said firmly, perhaps too firmly. "I really couldn't." Raj gave her a curious look but said nothing more as she returned to the dining room where Mr. Reynolds was now pacing near the entrance to the ballroom. "Here's the staff list," she said, handing him the paper. Mr. Reynolds barely glanced at it before continuing his rant to the coordinator. "The auction items are music-themed. The centerpieces are tiny pianos, for goodness sake. We promised an elegant musical evening." Sophia was turning to leave when Raj appeared beside her. "Mr. Reynolds," he said. "Sophia here studied at the Chen Music Conservatory. She's actually quite talented on piano." The floor seemed to drop beneath Sophia's feet. She shot Raj a look of utter betrayal, but it was too late. Mr. Reynolds had already turned his full attention to her, his expression changing from desperation to calculated interest. "Is that true?" he asked. I haven't played in years," Sophia stammered. "Not since I was 20. I wouldn't be any good." "The Chen Conservatory." The event coordinator perked up. "That's one of the most prestigious music schools in the country." Mr. Reynolds studied Sophia with new eyes. "You never mentioned this in your application." Sophia swallowed hard. "It wasn't relevant to serving tables." "It's relevant now," he said. "How many years did you study?" Sophia hesitated, but there was no way out. 15 years. But like I said, I haven't played, and that's more than enough." Mr. Reynolds cut her off. "The gala starts in 40 minutes. You'll play." "It wasn't a request. I can't," Sophia said, panic rising in her throat. "Please, I really can't." "This is an emergency situation, Sophia. The hotel needs you." His voice softened slightly, but his eyes remained firm. "Unless you have a medical reason why you cannot play, I'm afraid I must insist." Sophia felt dizzy. Memories she'd kept locked away for years were suddenly flooding back. The spotlights, the whispers, the crushing shame. Her hands began to tremble. "I have stage fright," she finally admitted. "Severe stage fright. That's why I stopped playing." Mr. Reynolds checked his watch. "The guests will be mingling and drinking. No one will be staring at you. Just provide some pleasant background music." Sophia looked desperately around the room, hoping someone would save her. But Raj was already back to serving, and the other staff were busy preparing for the influx of guests. "Mr. Reynolds," she tried one last time. "I haven't touched a piano in 5 years. I'll embarrass the hotel." His expression hardened. What would embarrass the hotel is promising music and delivering silence. "Now I need to know, are you a team player, Sophia?" The implied threat was clear. In this economy, with her rent due next week, she couldn't risk losing this job. "I'll do it," she whispered, the words feeling like stones in her mouth. Relief washed over Mr. Reynolds's face. "Excellent. Lisa will show you to the dressing room. You can't play in your server uniform." Before she could protest further, the event coordinator, Lisa, was already leading her away through the kitchen and down a staff hallway. "This is such a lucky break," Lisa chattered nervously. "We have some cocktail dresses for emergencies." "What size are you?" "Never mind, we'll find something that works." Sophia felt like she was moving through a dream, or rather a nightmare. The small dressing room was crammed with spare uniforms and a rack of formal wear for staff who might need to blend in at events. Lisa quickly pulled out 3 black dresses. "Try these. I'll be right outside." Left alone, Sophia sat heavily on a small chair, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. The memory of her last performance played vividly in her mind. The prestigious competition, the piece she'd practiced for months. The moment her mind went completely blank in front of hundreds of people, the painful silence, followed by pitying applause as she'd fled the stage in tears. She'd withdrawn from the conservatory the next day, unable to face her professors or fellow students. Music, once her greatest joy, had become her greatest source of pain. And now, 5 years later, she was being forced to face that fear again. With trembling hands, Sophia tried on the dresses. The second one, a simple A-line with cap sleeves, fit well enough. She stared at her reflection, hardly recognizing the pale, frightened woman looking back at her. A knock at the door startled her. 5 minutes, Lisa called. Sophia closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She could do this. Just simple background music. No one would be listening closely. No judges, no scores, no future hanging in the balance. When she emerged from the dressing room, Lisa handed her a glass of water. "You look lovely. Are you ready?" Sophia nodded mutely, following Lisa through the back corridors of the hotel to the ballroom entrance. Already, well-dressed guests were arriving, accepting champagne flutes from servers stationed at the door. The grand piano waited in the corner, its polished black surface gleaming under the chandeliers. Sophia approached it slowly as if it might bite her. She sat on the bench, adjusting it slightly, and lifted the fall board to reveal the keys beneath. The ivory and ebony stretched before her like a road she'd once known by heart, but had long avoided. She placed her fingers lightly on the keys without pressing down, feeling their cool smoothness. Around her, the room was filling with people in expensive clothes, laughing and talking, completely unaware of the drama unfolding in the corner. Mr. Reynolds caught her eye from across the room and gave her a curt nod. Sophia's heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Her mouth went dry, and for a moment she considered running, out of the hotel, away from this moment, away from the memories. But where would she go? And what would she do tomorrow when she had no job? She looked down at her hands resting on the keys. Once they had been her greatest gift. Now they felt like strangers. The room grew louder as more guests arrived. No one was paying any attention to her yet. Perhaps she could start quietly, ease into it while everyone was distracted. Sophia took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and pressed down on the first chord. Nothing happened. She had forgotten to turn on the electric piano. A small, hysterical laugh escaped her as she located the power switch. At least no one had noticed this first failure. As the piano hummed to life, Sophia realized her hands were shaking so badly she might not be able to play at all. "Just breathe," she whispered to herself. "Just breathe and play something simple." She placed her fingers on the keys once more and began a basic melody, one of the first pieces she had learned as a child. Her fingers moved stiffly, awkwardly, hitting wrong notes that made her wince. A few nearby guests glanced her way, then quickly looked away, continuing their conversations with forced enthusiasm. Sophia felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. This was exactly what she had feared. Making a fool of herself, embarrassing the hotel, confirming that she had been right to walk away from music. But she kept playing, moving through the simple piece mechanically, her muscles gradually remembering what her mind had tried to forget. Sophia's fingers stumbled over another wrong note and she winced. The simple children's tune she'd chosen wasn't working. Her hands were too tense, her mind too scattered. A few guests standing nearby had begun to exchange glances, their polite smiles thinning. She stopped playing abruptly, staring down at the keys. This had been a mistake. She couldn't do this. Across the room, Mr. Reynolds was deep in conversation with a woman wearing what looked like real diamonds, but Sophia could feel his awareness of her faltering performance. Any minute now he would come over and ask her to leave, and tomorrow she would be looking for a new job. Sophia closed her eyes, shutting out the room full of strangers. If she was going to fail, she might as well fail playing something that mattered to her. Almost without conscious thought, her hands shifted position on the keyboard, finding their way to the opening notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune. It had been her mother's favorite piece, the one Sophia had played at her funeral 7 years ago. She hadn't touched it since. The first delicate notes floated into the air, tentative and soft. Sophia kept her eyes closed, focusing only on the feel of the keys beneath her fingers, and the memory of her mother's smile when she played. Wrong notes still came, but she pushed through them, her hands gradually remembering what they once knew so well. The piece built slowly, gathering momentum and confidence. For several measures, Sophia forgot where she was, forgot the watching eyes and the pressure. There was only the music and the memory. When she reached the flowing middle section, her fingers began to move more surely, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought failed. The beautiful, dreamy melody filled the corner of the room, a few more people turning to look her way. She didn't notice. Her world had narrowed to just her hands on the keys and the music flowing through her. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she kept them closed, letting the familiar notes carry her away from the present moment. As the piece approached its gentle climax, Sophia felt something inside her shift. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly, her breathing deepened. The notes came more easily now, flowing one into another like water. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it had heart. She could feel that much, even through her fear. When the final notes faded away, Sophia sat motionless for a moment, almost afraid to open her eyes and break the spell. The quiet that followed seemed deeper than before. She finally looked up to find several people standing nearby, watching her with genuine interest. A white-haired man in an expensive suit nodded appreciatively. "That was lovely, my dear," he said. "Debussy, wasn't it?" Sophia nodded, her throat too tight to speak. "Are you taking requests?" asked a woman in a red dress, sipping champagne. "I'd love to hear some Chopin." Before Sophia could answer, another guest joined them. "The raindrop prelude would be perfect for this rainy evening," she suggested. Sophia glanced out the tall windows and noticed for the first time that rain was indeed falling outside, streaming down the glass in silver rivulets. She hadn't even heard it start. "I'm not sure I remember it perfectly," she admitted hesitantly. "No one's expecting perfection," the white-haired man said kindly. "Just play what moves you." Sophia looked across the room and caught Mr. Reynolds watching. He gave her a small nod, his earlier anger replaced by something like cautious relief. She turned back to the piano, her fingers finding the opening notes of Chopin's Prelude Opera 28, number 15. The steady, repeated notes mimicked the sound of raindrops, building to a stormy middle section before returning to the gentle pattern. Sophia found herself relaxing into the music, her body remembering how to sway with the phrases, how to breathe between passages. This time she kept her eyes open, watching her hands as they moved across the keys. They were rusty, yes, but they still knew what to do. 5 years of silence hadn't erased 15 years of training. As she finished the piece, a small smattering of applause broke out among the nearest guests. Sophia felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment, but also with something else. A hint of the old pleasure she had once taken in performing, before fear had stolen it away. More guests were drifting toward the piano now, drawn by the music. Someone requested Mozart, another asked for Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Sophia played what she could remember, sometimes improvising when her memory failed. No one seemed to mind the occasional mistake or simplified passage. As the hour wore on, Sophia's confidence grew incrementally. Her shoulders relaxed, her breathing deepened, and her hands remembered more and more of what they once could do. She wasn't playing at the level she had reached at the conservatory, but she was playing, really playing, for the first time in 5 years. During a brief pause between pieces, Lisa appeared at her side with a glass of water. "You're doing beautifully," she whispered. "Mr. Reynolds is thrilled. The governor just arrived and commented on the wonderful ambiance." Sophia took a grateful sip of water, suddenly aware of how thirsty she was. "How much longer do I need to play?" "Just until dinner is announced, about 20 more minutes. Then you can take a break while everyone eats." Sophia nodded, returning the glass. 20 more minutes. She could do that. As she considered what to play next, her fingers absently traced a melody. Not Chopin or Debussy or any of the classical masters she had studied so intensively. This was something else, something she had written herself years ago but never completed. Without really intending to, she began to play it, the hauntingly simple theme she had composed during her first year at the conservatory. It had been inspired by her childhood home near the mountains, the mist that would roll down the slopes in the early morning, the way the sunlight would gradually burn it away to reveal the peaks behind. The piece was unfinished. She had abandoned it along with everything else when she left music behind. But now, sitting at this piano in a room full of strangers, the next notes came to her as if they had been waiting all this time. She played softly at first, the left hand providing a gentle rolling accompaniment while the right hand carried the wistful melody. As the piece developed, she found herself adding new elements, a counter melody here, a shift to minor there, building to a climax she had never before imagined. Sophia lost track of time and place again, but in a different way than before. Earlier, she had closed her eyes to shut out the world. Now, though her eyes were open, she saw nothing but the music taking shape beneath her hands. It flowed through her, no longer a memory, but a living, growing thing. She didn't notice when the room grew quieter. She didn't see the waitstaff pausing in their duties, champagne trays temporarily forgotten. She didn't observe how conversations trailed off mid-sentence as more and more guests turned toward the corner where she sat. Sophia was completely absorbed in the act of creation, following the music where it led her. There was joy in it, yes, but also pain and longing, and finally, as the piece moved toward its conclusion, a sense of homecoming, of return. The final notes hung in the air like a question, softly fading away. Only then did Sophia become aware of the complete silence that had fallen over the room. She looked up, startled, to find nearly every guest staring at her. Her old panic threatened to return, but before it could take hold, the room erupted in applause. Warm, enthusiastic, genuine applause. Nothing like the pitying response to her failed performance years ago. These people weren't applauding out of obligation or sympathy. They had been moved. Sophia sat frozen on the bench, overwhelmed by the response and by what had just happened. She had not only played again, but had created something new, something that had apparently touched others. The realization was almost too much to process. The applause continued until Mr. Reynolds stepped forward, raising his hands for quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "dinner is served. Please make your way to your tables." As the guests began to move toward the dining area, many stopped to thank Sophia or to compliment her playing. She nodded and smiled, still too stunned to form proper responses. When most of the crowd had moved away, Mr. Reynolds approached the piano. "That was exceptional," he said, his earlier harshness gone. "Was that last piece your own composition?" Sophia nodded, sort of. "It's something I started years ago but never finished, until tonight." "Well, it was remarkable," he said, looking genuinely impressed. "Take a break now, have something to eat. But if you're willing, we'd love for you to play again after dinner, during the auction." Sophia hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no, to retreat back to the safety of anonymity. But another part, a part she had thought long dead, wanted to stay at the piano, wanted to discover what else might emerge if she kept playing. "I'll play after dinner," she heard herself say. Mr. Reynolds smiled. "Excellent. There's someone who'd like to speak with you, by the way. He specifically asked to meet the pianist." He gestured toward a distinguished-looking man waiting nearby, his silver hair contrasting with his dark suit. There was something familiar about him, but Sophia couldn't quite place him. "Who is he?" she asked, suddenly nervous again. Mr. Reynolds lowered his voice. "That's Thomas Harrington, director of the National Conservatory. He's one of our biggest donors tonight." Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. Thomas Harrington, one of the most respected names in music education. He had been on the judging panel the day of her disastrous final performance, and he was walking straight toward her. Sophia's first instinct was to run. Her legs tensed, ready to carry her away from this unexpected collision with her past. But there was nowhere to go. Thomas Harrington was already standing before her, his keen eyes studying her face. "Ms. Chen," he said, his voice exactly as she remembered it, deep and measured, with the slight accent of someone who had grown up speaking multiple languages. "I thought it was you." Sophia gripped the piano bench, her knuckles turning white. "Professor Harrington," she managed to say, "I didn't expect to see you here." He smiled slightly. "Nor I you, especially not playing piano, may I?" He gestured to the empty space beside her on the bench. Sophia nodded stiffly, sliding over to make room. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "I've been asked to say a few words after dinner about the importance of music education," he explained, settling beside her. "It seems particularly fitting now." Sophia stared down at her hands, unable to meet his gaze. This man had witnessed her greatest humiliation, had been part of the panel that had watched her freeze on stage, forget her piece entirely, and flee in tears. "Your last piece," he said after a moment. "That wasn't Chopin or Beethoven." "No," Sophia admitted. "It was just something I wrote, or started to write, a long time ago. It was extraordinary." Sophia looked up in surprise, sure she had misheard him. "Unfinished, yes," he continued, "but with remarkable promise. I don't say that lightly." Sophia didn't know how to respond. 5 years ago, praise from Thomas Harrington would have meant everything to her. Now it felt surreal, disconnected from the person she had become. "I'm sorry, but I should check if they need help in the kitchen," she said abruptly. Starting to rise, Professor Harrington placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Sophia," he said, using her first name now, "before you go, I'd like to ask you something. What happened to you after the Chen competition? You simply disappeared." Sophia sank back onto the bench, the question hitting her like a physical blow. The Chen competition, named for no relation of hers, just a coincidence of names, had been her breaking point. "The day everything fell apart. I left music," she said simply. I couldn't face it anymore." Professor Harrington nodded slowly. "Because of what happened on stage?" "I froze," Sophia said, the words coming out more bitterly than she intended. "In front of everyone. I couldn't remember a single note of a piece I had played perfectly 100 times. I made a complete fool of myself." "You had a panic attack," he corrected her gently. "It happens to many performers, even professionals. It doesn't define you as a musician." Sophia laughed humorlessly. "It defined me enough. I lost my scholarship. My teacher suggested I reconsider my career path. My roommate left pamphlets about stress management on my bed. And so you walked away from a remarkable gift," Professor Harrington said. It wasn't a question. Sophia felt a flash of anger. It wasn't a gift anymore. It was torture. Every time I even thought about playing, I would start to shake. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't. She trailed off, suddenly aware of where they were. In the middle of a charity gala surrounded by wealthy donors who were now enjoying their expensive dinners in the adjacent room. This was hardly the place for such a conversation. "I should go," she said again, more firmly this time. Professor Harrington stood, allowing her to pass. "Of course. But Sophia, what happened tonight when you played your composition? Did it feel like torture then?" The question stopped her. She turned back to face him, considering. "No," she admitted quietly. "It felt different. Different how?" Sophia searched for the words to describe what had happened. Like I wasn't thinking about playing. I was just playing, like the music was coming through me, not from me." She shook her head, embarrassed by how it sounded. "That probably doesn't make sense." "On the contrary," Professor Harrington said, "it makes perfect sense. That state of flow, of being completely present in the music, it's what every true musician seeks." A server appeared at their side, offering Professor Harrington a reminder that his table was waiting. He nodded in acknowledgement but kept his attention on Sophia. "Will you play again after dinner?" he asked. Sophia hesitated. "Mr. Reynolds asked me to, for the auction." "Good. I'd like to hear more of your composition if you're willing to share it." Before Sophia could respond, he was walking away, following the server to his table. She stood frozen beside the piano, trying to process what had just happened. Professor Harrington, whose opinion had once meant so much to her, had called her playing extraordinary, and he wanted to hear more. Sophia made her way to the kitchen, where a plate of food had been set aside for her. She ate mechanically, barely tasting anything, her mind replaying the conversation and, before that, the experience of playing her unfinished composition. It had felt different. For those few minutes, the fear had receded, replaced by something else, something she had almost forgotten. Joy, connection, purpose. "Earth to Sophia," said Raj, waving a hand in front of her face. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." In a way, she had. The ghost of the musician she once was, the person she had tried so hard to leave behind. "I'm fine," she said, pushing her plate away. "Just tired?" Raj leaned against the counter. "You were amazing out there. Why didn't you ever tell us you could play like that?" Sophia shrugged uncomfortably. "It's not something I talk about." "Well, you should. You had the whole room mesmerized. Even old man Reynolds looked impressed, and I didn't think his face could make that expression." Despite herself, Sophia smiled. "He's not that bad, says you, now that you're the star of the show." Raj glanced at the clock. "Speaking of which, I think they're wrapping up dinner. You're on again soon." Sophia nodded, her stomach tightening with renewed anxiety. But it was different this time. Less paralyzing. More like the normal nervousness before a performance that she had known in her early years of playing. Before the fear had taken over completely, she made her way back to the ballroom, where staff were clearing dinner plates and setting up the auction items on display tables. The piano waited in the corner, looking less intimidating than it had earlier. Sophia sat down, adjusting the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. She played a few quiet warm-up exercises, feeling the muscles in her fingers and wrists loosen. Around her, guests were finishing their desserts and coffee, their conversations creating a pleasant background hum. Mr. Reynolds appeared at her side. "We'll begin the auction in about 10 minutes, he said. "If you could play something quietly until then, and then perhaps something more attention-grabbing when we're ready to start." Sophia nodded. "I can do that," he smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his usually stern face. "You've been a lifesaver tonight, Sophia. Thank you." As he walked away, Sophia began to play a gentle Schubert piece, letting it flow beneath the conversations without demanding attention. She felt strangely calm, almost at peace. From the corner of her eye, she could see Professor Harrington at a table near the front of the room. He was engaged in conversation with the people around him, but every so often his gaze would drift toward the piano, toward her. What did he see when he looked at her? The terrified student who had fled the stage in tears, or something else, something she herself couldn't yet recognize. As the Schubert piece ended, Mr. Reynolds moved to the center of the room, tapping a spoon against a glass to get everyone's attention. The conversations gradually died down as all eyes turned to him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "thank you for your generous support of children's music education. Before we begin our auction, I'd like to invite our pianist, Sophia Chen, to play something special for us." A spotlight suddenly illuminated the piano, making Sophia blink in surprise. This was not what she had expected. Background music for the auction, yes. Being the center of attention? Definitely not. She looked toward Mr. Reynolds in confusion, but he merely gestured encouragingly for her to play. Across the room, Professor Harrington was watching intently, his expression unreadable. Sophia took a deep breath. She could feel the familiar panic starting to rise, the pounding heart, the shallow breathing, the trembling hands. For a moment, she was back on that other stage, frozen with fear as the silence stretched unbearably. But then she thought of what had happened earlier, when she had played her own composition without thinking, when the music had flowed through her like water. Could she find that place again? She closed her eyes, centering herself, and then began to play. Not Schubert or Chopin this time, but her own piece. the one that had emerged so unexpectedly earlier. But now she took it further, developing the themes with growing confidence, letting the music tell its story more fully. The room fell completely silent as she played, the spotlight warm on her shoulders. Sophia kept her eyes open this time, watching her hands move across the keys with increasing assurance. The notes came more easily now, as if they had been waiting all these years to be discovered. As she played, something shifted inside her. The fear was still there, but it was no longer in control. For the first time in 5 years, Sophia felt like herself again. Not the frightened woman who had hidden from her own talent, but the musician who had once found such joy in creating beauty. The piece built to a climax, more powerful than before, then gentled into a conclusion that felt right, felt complete. As the final notes faded, Sophia sat perfectly still, afraid to break the spell. The silence that followed lasted only a moment before the room erupted in applause. Enthusiastic, genuine applause that washed over her like a wave. Sophia looked up, blinking in the spotlight, to see the entire room on their feet. A standing ovation. And in the front row, Professor Thomas Harrington was smiling at her with what looked very much like pride. The applause seemed to go on forever. Sophia sat stunned, unable to move as the sound washed over her. People were smiling, some even wiping away tears. Mr. Reynolds stood nearby, beaming with satisfaction, as if her performance had been his doing all along. Finally, Sophia remembered to breathe. She stood shakily and gave a small bow, overwhelmed by the response. As the applause began to fade, Mr. Reynolds stepped forward to begin the auction, and Sophia gratefully slipped into the background once more, playing quiet, gentle music as the bidding began. Her mind was spinning. What had just happened? How had she gone from terrified server to acclaimed pianist in the space of a few hours? It felt unreal, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. The auction proceeded smoothly, with Sophia providing musical interludes between items. She stuck to classical pieces now, things she had once known by heart and that were coming back to her with surprising ease. Her fingers still fumbled occasionally, but it no longer mattered. Something fundamental had shifted. When the final item had been sold, a private concert with a famous cellist going for an astonishing amount, Mr. Reynolds announced that the evening had raised over $200,000 for children's music education. The room erupted in applause once more, and Sophia added a triumphant flourish on the piano to mark the moment. As the guests began to gather their belongings and say their goodbyes, many stopped by the piano to compliment Sophia. She thanked them with quiet embarrassment, still not quite believing what was happening. "You should have business cards," one woman told her. "My daughter is getting married next spring, and we'd love to have you play at the reception." "I'm not really. I don't," Sophia stammered, but the woman pressed on. "Think about it, dear. Here's my card. Call me if you're interested." She placed a cream-colored business card on top of the piano and walked away before Sophia could protest further. To her surprise, others followed suit. By the time the room had emptied, there was a small stack of business cards on the piano, along with several napkins bearing hastily scribbled phone numbers. "Looks like you have some potential clients," said Professor Harrington, appearing at her side. "Private performances can be quite lucrative." Sophia stared at the pile of cards. "This is crazy. I haven't played in years. I'm completely out of practice. I made so many mistakes. And yet you moved an entire room to tears," he said simply. "Technical perfection isn't everything, Sophia, you know that." She did know that. Or at least she had once. Somewhere along the way she had forgotten. "May I sit?" Professor Harrington asked, gesturing to the piano bench. Sophia nodded, sliding over to make room. She felt strangely calm in his presence now, the earlier panic having subsided. "I have a proposition for you," he said, his tone casual but his eyes intent. "The National Conservatory is launching a new program next semester for musicians who have taken time away from their craft. Not students in the traditional sense, but artists looking to reconnect with their music in a supportive environment." Sophia's hand stilled on the keys. "I'm not sure what you're suggesting." "I'm suggesting that you might be interested in applying. Full scholarships are available for promising candidates." Sophia shook her head automatically. "I can't go back to school. I have a job, rent to pay. My life is different now." "The program is designed for working adults," Professor Harrington explained. "Classes are evenings and weekends. And if tonight is any indication, your talent hasn't diminished. It's merely been dormant. Sophia stared at the piano keys, unable to meet his gaze.
You saw what happened at the Chen competition.
What if it happens again? What if I freeze up in front of an audience or can't remember the notes or… What if you soar? He interrupted gently. What if you create music that moves people as you did tonight? Isn't that possibility worth the risk? Sophia remained silent, conflicting emotions washing through her. Fear, yes, that was still there, but also unexpectedly a flicker of hope. A small tentative excitement, I don't know, she said finally. I need to think about it. Professor Harrington nodded, reaching into his jacket pocket. Of course. Here's my card. The application deadline is 2 weeks from today. He placed the card on top of the others. I hope you'll consider it. Sophia, music needs voices like yours. With that, he stood and walked away, leaving Sophia alone at the piano once more. She sat there for a long time, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing down, lost in thought. The room had emptied, the hotel staff quietly clearing away the last evidence of the evening's event. Earth to Sophia, said Raj, approaching with a tray of empty glasses. We're all done here. You coming? Sophia blinked, realizing how late it had grown. Sorry. Yes, I'm coming. You were incredible tonight, Raj said, his usual teasing tone replaced by genuine admiration. I had no idea you could play like that. Sophia smiled faintly. Neither did I, honestly. Well, the boss is thrilled. He's been telling everyone how he discovered you. Sophia laughed despite herself. Discovered me? I've been working here for 8 months. Yeah, but now you're not just the quiet girl who serves drinks. You're Sophia Chen, piano virtuoso. Raj grinned. I suspect there's a raise in your future. Or a complete mental breakdown, Sophia muttered, gathering the business cards and slipping them into her pocket. Raj's expression grew more serious. Hey, are you okay? For real? Sophia considered the question. Was she okay? Everything had changed tonight. The careful walls she had built around her past had crumbled, leaving her exposed. Vulnerable. But also free in a way she hadn't been in years. I think so, she said slowly. It's just a lot to process. Well, a bunch of us are going for late-night dumplings at Golden Dragon. You should come. Take your mind off all this for a while. Sophia hesitated, then nodded. You know what? That sounds perfect. She followed Raj to the staff room to change out of the borrowed dress and back into her regular clothes. As she zipped up her jacket, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her roommate, Lily. How was work? Still up for movie night? Sophia stared at the message, suddenly aware of the strange disconnect between her ordinary life and what had just happened. How could she possibly explain this evening to Lily, who knew her only as a quiet server who avoided anything related to music? She typed back, work was interesting, tell you about it later. Going for dumplings with coworkers. Don't wait up. As she slipped her phone back into her pocket, her fingers brushed against Professor Harrington's business card. She pulled it out, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. Thomas Harrington, Director, National Conservatory of Music. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks to decide whether to apply to the program, to take a step back toward the world she had fled 5 years ago. The thought sent a flutter of anxiety through her chest, but it wasn't the overwhelming panic of before. It was nervousness mixed with possibility. Sophia tucked the card carefully back into her pocket and went to join her co-workers. Tonight she would eat dumplings and try to be normal. Tomorrow she would think about what came next. The late-night restaurant was crowded and noisy, steam rising from bamboo baskets and the clatter of chopsticks against plates creating a cheerful backdrop to the conversation. Sophia sat squeezed between Raj and Lisa, who had joined them after overseeing the final cleanup of the ballroom. And then when you played that piece you wrote yourself, I swear Mr. Reynolds almost fell over, Lisa was saying, gesturing with her chopsticks. I've never seen him look so shocked. Or impressed. Sophia ducked her head, embarrassed by the attention. It wasn't really that good. I was just making it up as I went along. That's even more amazing, Raj insisted. Most people can't even play songs someone else wrote, let alone create their own. Who was that older guy you were talking to? Asked Diane from the front desk. The distinguished-looking one with the silver hair? Sophia hesitated. Professor Harrington. He's the director of the National Conservatory. A chorus of impressed noises rose from around the table. Fancy, said Raj. What did he want? Sophia reached for her tea, buying time. He invited me to apply to a program. for musicians who have taken time away from performing. The table fell silent for a moment. Are you going to do it? Lisa asked quietly. Sophia shrugged, trying to appear casual. I don't know, maybe. It's a big commitment. But you'd get to play piano again, said Diane. Professionally, I mean. Isn't that what you want? Was it what she wanted? 5 years ago, music had been her entire identity, her only passion. Then it had become her greatest source of pain. Now she wasn't sure what it was. I used to think so, Sophia said slowly. Before tonight, I couldn't even imagine touching a piano again without having a panic attack. But something changed when I was playing. It felt right, like I'd found something I didn't know I was missing. The others nodded, waiting for her to continue. But I'm scared, Sophia admitted. What if it was just a fluke? What if the fear comes back? What if I can't do it again? Raj bumped her shoulder gently with his. What if you can? Sophia looked around the table at her co-workers. Friends, really, though she had never let them get too close. They were watching her with genuine care, wanting the best for her even if they didn't fully understand what she was going through. I guess I have 2 weeks to figure it out, she said, reaching for a dumpling. As the conversation moved on to other topics, Sophia found herself thinking about the piano waiting in the empty hotel ballroom. For the first time in 5 years, she felt an urge to return to it, to sit down and play again, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. It was a small feeling, fragile and new. But it was there, undeniably there, like a tiny flame that had somehow survived the storm. 2 weeks could feel like an eternity, or pass in the blink of an eye. For Sophia, it somehow managed to do both. The morning after the charity gala, she woke late, her dreams filled with music and applause that faded as she opened her eyes. For a moment, she wondered if the entire evening had been a dream. The piano, the audience, Professor Harrington's offer. But when she reached for her jacket draped over a chair, the stack of business cards in the pocket confirmed it had all been real. Sophia had the day off, and she spent it wandering around her small apartment, restless and unsettled. Her roommate Lily noticed her distraction. Are you okay? Lily asked as Sophia picked up the same magazine for the third time without reading it. You've been weird since you got home last night. I'm fine, Sophia said automatically. Then reconsidering, actually no. Something happened at work yesterday. Something unexpected. She found herself telling Lily the whole story, about Mr. Reynolds ordering her to play, about her panic and eventual breakthrough, about the standing ovation and Professor Harrington's offer. Lily listened with growing amazement. Wait, so you're like some piano genius who's been hiding in plain sight all this time? How did I not know this about you? Sophia smiled faintly. I don't talk about it. I haven't played in years, not since. She trailed off, still finding it hard to speak about that final, disastrous performance. But now you might go back to it? Lily asked. To music school or whatever? I don't know, Sophia admitted. It's complicated. What's complicated? You played, people loved it. You got offered a spot in some fancy program. Sounds pretty straightforward to me. Sophia shook her head. It's not that simple. You don't understand what it was like when it all fell apart. The panic, the shame. What if that happens again? Lily considered this, then shrugged. What if it doesn't? It was the same thing Raj had said the night before. Such a simple question, but it stuck with Sophia throughout the day, through the evening, into the next morning when she returned to work at the hotel. What if it doesn't? Everything at the hotel had changed. Word of her performance had spread throughout the staff, and even guests who hadn't been at the gala somehow knew about the piano-playing waitress. Mr. Reynolds called her into his office and offered her a new position. House pianist for the hotel restaurant, 3 nights a week at twice her current hourly rate. But I'm not, Sophia started to protest. You are, Mr. Reynolds said firmly. I saw it. Everyone saw it. You're a pianist, Sophia, whether you want to admit it or not. She left his office in a daze, clutching the formal offer letter. 3 nights a week at the piano. The thought sent a flutter of both excitement and terror through her chest. That afternoon, Sophia found herself drawn to the ballroom during her break. It was empty, being set up for a wedding the next day, but the piano remained in its corner. Glancing around to make sure no one was watching, Sophia slipped onto the bench. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. quietly at first, then with growing confidence as she discovered that the magic of the previous night hadn't been a fluke. She played for 15 minutes, exploring fragments of classical pieces mixed with her own improvisation. When she finally stopped, she found Raj watching from the doorway. "Don't stop on my account," he said, grinning. "I was enjoying the free concert." Sophia felt her cheeks flush. "I should get back to work." "Reynolds would probably let you play all day if you wanted to," Raj said as they walked together toward the restaurant.
"He hasn't stopped bragging about discovering you."
"Called you his diamond in the rough to the management team this morning." Sophia rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. "I guess I should be flattered." "You should definitely be negotiating for a bigger raise," Raj countered. "But seriously, have you thought about that program the professor told you about?" Sophia nodded. "I've been thinking about nothing else. And I'm still not sure." The days passed in a blur of work, thinking, and increasingly frequent visits to the piano during quiet moments. Sophia found herself staying late after shifts, playing when the restaurant was empty and the cleaning staff were the only audience. They would pause in their work sometimes, mops or vacuums temporarily forgotten as they listened. One week after the gala, Sophia played her first official night as the hotel's pianist. She wore a simple black dress purchased specially for the occasion, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her hands trembled slightly as she began, but the fear receded more quickly this time, replaced by a calm focus that deepened as the evening progressed. Guests paused in their conversations to listen, some requesting favorite pieces, others simply smiling their appreciation as they dined. By the end of the night, Sophia felt tired but strangely peaceful. She had played for 3 hours without a single panic attack. The second night went even better. The third was nearly perfect. "You're becoming quite the attraction," Mr. Reynolds told her after the weekend. "We've had several reservations specifically requesting tables near the piano." Sophia wasn't sure how to feel about that. Being the center of attention had never been her goal, and it still made her uneasy. But the joy of playing again, that was undeniable. With 1 week left until the application deadline for the National Conservatory program, Sophia finally called the number on Professor Harrington's card. "I've been wondering if I'd hear from you," he said when his assistant put her through. "I have some questions about the program," Sophia said carefully. "Before I decide." They spoke for nearly an hour. The program was indeed designed for musicians who had stepped away from performance, whether due to career changes, family obligations, or, as in Sophia's case, performance anxiety. Classes were held evenings and weekends. Scholarships covered tuition, but students were expected to maintain other employment or sources of income. "It's not about training for traditional concert careers," Professor Harrington explained. "It's about reconnecting with music, finding your voice again on your terms." "And if the panic comes back?" Sophia asked, voicing her deepest fear. "If I can't perform when it matters, then we work through it," he said simply. "The program includes coaching on performance psychology. Many of our faculty have dealt with similar challenges themselves." By the time the call ended, Sophia had all the information she needed. What she didn't have was certainty. 3 days before the deadline, Sophia was playing at the hotel when a young couple approached the piano during her break. The woman, visibly pregnant, smiled shyly. "I hope you don't mind us bothering you," she said. "But we were here last week too, and you're playing. It's the only thing that seems to calm the baby." She gestured to her rounded belly with a laugh. "He's been kicking nonstop for weeks, but when you play, he settles right down. My husband thinks he's going to be a musician. Would you—" The husband began hesitantly. "Would you mind playing something specifically for him? For the baby, I mean. Whatever you think would be good." Sophia was touched by the request. "Of course," she said, turning back to the piano. "Any preferences?" "Something of yours," the woman said. "That piece you played last week that wasn't classical. It was so beautiful." Sophia's fingers found the keys, and she began to play the composition that had emerged so unexpectedly the night of the gala. She had continued to develop it over the past 2 weeks, refining the melody, deepening the harmonies. As she played, the young couple stood quietly beside the piano, the woman's hand resting on her belly. When Sophia finished, the woman had tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "That was perfect." As they walked away, Sophia sat very still, a realization washing over her. Her music had touched someone, not because of technical brilliance or years of training, but because of the emotion it carried, the humanity in it. This was why she had fallen in love with music in the first place, before competitions and perfectionism had twisted it into something else entirely. The next day, Sophia submit.